Over my career, I've done a lot of interviews with some well-known people and some people no one's heard about before. I thought it might be fun to drag some of them out of the archives and share them here on YouTube. Very few people active in Hollywood today can trace their roots back to the Little Rascals. Well, Lucky Brown can. And he told me at the beginning of the interview that he is indeed a child of the L.A. area.
I was born at home, so I'd be close to my mother.
Tell us about your childhood. You a product of Los Angeles originally?
I was born in Hollywood, off of down by Vermont. At that time, that was a little park on the top of the hill. I think it was called Olive Hill Park. We had an old big house, about 4 or 5 blocks, I guess, west. And it was built like in a eastern house. It had a big basement in it, and I mean a big basement.
Yeah, and basements are rather uncommon out here in California.
And my father looked at the basement, and he put in a pool table and turned it to a game room. He was a Hollywood doctor. Now, I'm talking, he came out here before World War I. And so, you know, this was a village. It was the Hollywood Village. My mother's family built Paramount, and then it was bought by Lasky Famous Players, but it was the Brunton Studios. If you go on the lot, there's still some manhole covers, those big old iron waffles that say Brunton Studios. Anyway, Mr. Zucker, I thought, because I knew the family had owned the lot, I thought he was my uncle. Well, I was a little wrong there.
Anyway, this is Adolf Zucker
and Lottie Zucker. And he told me the story of how Paramount happened. He had been in San Francisco and kicking around as a young man. There was a couple of Jewish brothers that invented something. It was a little cookie. They took the little round Chinese flat cookie, folded it up, and stuck a little piece of paper in there that said, you will take a long trip or whatever. You know. The fortune cookie. And he found out that they were paying 25 cents for everything they used.
You mean the fortunes?
The little fortunes.
So he wrote 100. Somebody had to write those.
Yeah, he wrote 100 of them, came back, and got $25. And he told me, he said, and they're still using them. He says, no residuals in those days. Anyway,
now, this would have been about what year?
I would say probably like 1905 or 6.
Well, that was a lot of money back then.
Oh, yes. I mean, so he came to Hollywood, wanted to get in the picture business. He thought that was going to be a big business. The Lasky Famous Players were on Vine Street, just north of Sunset. As a matter of fact, the old NBC studios stood on that part of that property. So he went to see them and said, I want to get in the picture business. And I understand you wanted to buy this property over here at the Brunton Studios. Yes, young man. Well, if I can get the money, I want to be a partner. And they said, oh, sure, yes, of course, you go get the money. It was like $240,000. I mean, whew. Just got married to Lottie, his new wife, and got on the train, went to New York, got on the boat, went to London. Turns out Lottie's family were the big banking company in England.
Oh, that's convenient.
Yes, the Rothschild, not Rothschild, Roth, they corrected me, Rothschild. And he had pictures, and he made his presentation all up at the board. And they said, just a minute, where is California? He said, but the real estate is growing and so forth. All right, young man, you're in the family. You got your money. Came back. Mr. Lasky, I have the money to buy the studio. Sure, kid. Yes, of course you have. He said, call San Francisco, Bank of Italy.
So he calls up and they said, sure, he's good for it.
They went, you know, their jaw dropped open. Oh, this kid here, callow youth. He raised $240,000 like nothing. So the argument went on of whose name is going to go first. He said, well, I put up the money. I mean, and Cecil B. DeMille, who was one of the partners of
Lasky.
Yeah, said, let's not argue about names. Let's just pick a neutral one. And they picked Paramount, and there it was. They bought the studio. The gentleman who raised the money, who ran the studio, who was a sharp man, sold the end of they owned the whole lot from Santa Monica to Melrose. Sold that half off for as much money, almost as much money as he paid for the whole studio.
The reason they came west to start with was because of the weather.
Yeah.
Film was so slow, took a lot of light to photograph everything, and because Westerns didn't need sets inside, that's why in the silent era, there were Westerns every 5 minutes, and you only needed to go 4 or 5 miles outside of L.A. at the time to get into the rugged boondocks.
Well, interesting thing on that, Mr. DeMille, who I worked for in a couple of pictures, was sitting around like this talking. He says, you know, it's interesting. We were making Westerns in New Jersey. You know, the weather was lousy. We had a couple, 3 months that we could shoot, and then otherwise you had to build a set inside. And somebody says, why don't we go west? I understand Arizona has 365 days of beautiful weather. Gentlemen, pack everything up. We're going on. So they get on the train and they hit Phoenix, Arizona. Now, Phoenix has 2 or 3 times a year a biblical downpour. I mean, the water hits the ground and bounces. And sure enough, when they landed, you couldn't see out the windows.
So they get to Phoenix, and there's a deluge of rain. Who gave them the idea then to come ahead on to California?
Well, the porter on the train, the black porter, told them California. Instead of just desert, it's got the ocean out there where you can do boats, and you could do... Because he evidently was a movie fan.
And they got snow.
He said, all right, everybody, back on the train. We're going to California. So they get to California. Well, this was it. Like Moses that put the staff down and said, this is the promised land. They had everything they wanted. Do a pirate picture? You want to go do the Swiss Alps? You want to go to the desert for the Foreign Legion? You want to do a Western? You have it all within, he said, all within 20 minutes. Well, that was the saga of how Hollywood, he said, Phoenix, Arizona would have been Hollywood.
If it hadn't been raining.
If it hadn't poured down. And he said the day that we landed there was the one day out of maybe 2 or 3 times a year that it would do that.
DeMille was such a legend. I mean, I am just now listening to some of those old Lux Radio theaters, which he was the titular producer of until they got in a little union tiff there.
And you know what he did?
What was that?
He went next door to the hotel, had him string a wire across. He wouldn't come in there. He did it from the hotel room.
Wow.
This is the DeMille.
And I loved it. He would always say, this is Cecil B. DeMille saying good night from Hollywood.
Yes.
Yeah, that great closing.
They loved that.
What was DeMille like personally? I've heard stories both ways. He was a pussycat and a dictator, or both.
I don't know what he did before he was a director. I think when he was in diapers, he probably was directing. Had a picture in his mind of what he wanted, and that was it. And no argument. Although, funny line that I said, if I ever write a book, which I am, I was going to use his line. We're doing Samson and Delilah. They have an orgy scene with the dancers and the...
And DeMille loved to get away with putting one of those in most of his movies.
So he's walking down now. On the corner across from the main gate was a delicatessen. So they had the food brought in from there, fruit and everything along the table. And as he's walking down with his riding crop, I told you, no potato salad at the orgy. I said, what a hell of a title for a book.
Absolutely, yes. Oh, how much easier was it to direct in the silent era, because you could make all the noise you wanted directing, than it was in the sound era, where you could not shout orders to people?
Sometimes they did. They cut it out. But you want to see, they're probably stills. They had a megaphone that must have been 5 feet long, hung on a gimbal, that they could turn it around this way. And the assistants would get up there and shout through this thing, and it carried. And I said, boy, you'd be out there. I remember working at Universal, and we were doing The Prince and the Pauper. And they had these big stands with this megaphone on it that was a good 5 feet or 6 feet long.
Because no PA system.
No PA system, and no electronics, and they'd shout through this. All right, now kids, get ready. The king is going to walk out, and you're all going to cheer or whatever.
I must tell the audience, I'm looking through pictures of Lucky, whose first name is Ewing.
Yes,
Brown.
Ewing Miles Brown.
And And here is a young kid in a coat, very, very nattily dressed. How old were you? Let me hold it up to the microphone here. How old were you in that
My mother
picture?
said that I went to work for Hal Roach because I was a big kid, tall. I was 4.5. She told everybody I was 5. I was Algernon, the snotty rich kid.
Uh-huh.
I had the chauffeur-driven limousine, and he'd pick me up and bring me to school and so forth. I was not in the gang. I was not an our-gang kid. I was what they called the schoolroom kids. There were about 12 of us, plus the gang, that there was only about 18 of us in the whole cast, but we were the schoolroom kids. And they would feature us in something. My deal was that I wanted to join the gang, and they said, okay, we'll initiate him. And they rubbed their hands together. And I remember what they used, the prop man. There was a soap called Packer's Tar Soap, and it had a strong odor. I could smell it almost today. And he mashed these things up and made a tarry mess out of it. So on camera, it looked like tar. So they initiated me, and I'm a mess. They put me in mud puddles. They dumped stuff on me. The stuff's running down my face, and you're now in the gang. But we can't have an Algernon. What are we going to call him? We'll call him Stinky.
Of course, worked for Hal Roach, who lived to be, 100, I think?
I went to his 100th birthday.
The second in command at Roach Studios was?
Yeah, Frank Seltzer. Later, I ran into Frank Seltzer for something. I had an office on Vine and Melrose. I ran into him at the lab, and I heard his name, and I said, pardon me, you're Mr. Seltzer? Yes. I said, were you the Mr. Seltzer that was at Hal Roach Studios? He said, yeah, I ran the studio. And so I told him who I was. We were buddies right away. By the way, his other brother was the head of all promotion and so forth, Jules Seltzer, at 20th Century Fox. The other brother was a PR man at Paramount that worked for Mr. DeMille and Samson and Delilah. He later became a producer, Walter Seltzer. Walter did El Cid, 26 Days in Peking or something.
I can hear Dmitri Tiomkin's music.
Oh, Dmitri.
Wait a minute, 50, wasn't it Peking, wasn't it?
Yeah, 55 Days in Peking, yes. There's a character there. I had fun with him.
Tiomkin?
Oh, I knew him.
Russian, wasn't he?
Yes. And by the way, I was involved at the end of High Noon. There's a history to that one, too. The producer had a 5-picture deal with Columbia Pictures, and he just gotten the rights to Death of a Salesman, and he owed him 1 picture. And they said, boy, we got Death of a Salesman. This is a coup. He said, no, you don't got it. I'm not giving it this damn. He'd have nothing but problems with him. There was not a happy association. He says, I owe you 1 picture. You'll get 1 picture. So he ran around and found an old it was one of those dime novels called A Little Tin Star. Now they had to raise money to do it.
Now, are you telling me that High Noon was going to be a throwaway?
Oh, it's an interesting throwaway. They ran around, and there was a gentleman that owned a studio on Cahuenga, and they went to him, and he says, well, I have some friends, Armenian friends up in the valley that are the lettuce, grow lettuce and stuff, and one of them loves Western. We'll go to him. Well, it's $250,000. They go up there, and the guy said, wonderful, I love Westerns, great. I put up the money. And as they're leaving, and everybody's happy, he's got his hand on the door. As long as you have Gary Cooper. Oops.
What a proviso.
I can't. Gary Cooper gets more than that.
We were going to use Randolph Scott. He's out of work.
Mr. Cooper did not have an agent. He didn't need it. He said, if they don't know who I am, what the hell with them.
Sure.
He had an attorney called Prince Metal. And Mr. Prince Metal did the contracts and handled everything for him. So they go to Prince Metal and said, what would Mr. Cooper cost us? And I forgot what it was. It was like $200,000. It doubled their budget. So they run back up there and said, we need another $200,000. He said, well, I don't have that much more. I could probably put up another 50. I'll go to my friends over here. They're in the carrot business. And they cobbled together a group of 3 or 4 investors.
So a salad sponsored.
Yes, it was a
High
salad
Noon.
picture. The picture was almost uncuttable. It was patched together, taken over to them, and Mr. Cohen threw it at them and said, get off my lot. I want the other picture. I don't want this crap. This is terrible. It was. Now, they got a problem. Now, the editor on that, I had worked for him as an assistant editor. He said, give me about $50,000 or $60,000 a place to work, and I'll give you a picture. Okay? Elmo Williams. He put in the train coming. He put in the clock. He put in the poor guy. He took scenes that were in the house between the wife, who, was a Quaker, and she didn't want to, don't do this, And he says, but I have to. Recut the picture, get it all together, and now they need music. She calls his friend Dimitri. I have no money. I'll have to pay you when we release the picture, Dimitri.
So do it on spec?
He said, well, do something. He said, well, I can give you $5,000. And he said, that's lunch. I pay my girls more money than that anyway. So he came back 2 days later with, do not forsake me, oh, you, my darling. And I said, wow, that's great. This is marvelous stuff. I said, but it's not Western, and yet it is. I said, it's so haunting. I said, how did you do this and it's so fast? He says, it's an old Russian lullaby that my mother used to sing me. I just put words to it.
Wow. Roach, in his way, was a driving force in Hollywood and produced tons of stuff. Yes.
Laurel and Hardy were there.
Do you agree with a lot of people that Mickey Rooney was probably the most multi-talented actor of the last century?
I worked with him originally. We got together as kids. He worked for Hal Roach.
He was Joe Ewell Jr.
Yeah. By the way, there's a story on that one, too. His father was a burlesque comic downtown on Main Street with one of the big burlesque houses. MGM were looking for talent, and they signed Mickey Rooney. Originally was in our gang. He was, at that time, Mickey McGuire. The only problem was that was from a comic strip, and it was copyrighted. So he couldn't use the name. They could use it there because they had the rights on it. So now, here he is, and they were looking for another Irish name. Ewell is an Irish name, by the way. And they were looking for another. They said, well, Rooney's Irish. He said, good, he's Mickey Rooney. And that was it. He said, I'm 40 years old. I can't get out of high school. Because he was so short. When he's in town, we have lunch together, he and his wife and my wife.
Well, I remember interviewing him one time when they were doing a retrospective about Judy Garland.
Oh, God.
And I asked him about Judy, and he pauses, and he said to me, she is still in my heart. Oh. I think of her all the time. What a couple they made. They were the cutest kids in the world.
Yeah. But, the same thing, 40 years old, they're still in high school. I laughed. Mickey, I knew him through his ups and downs, through his wives. He married a gal by the name of Ava Gardner.
Yes. How much shorter was he than she?
All of his wives.
Yeah, they'd have to be.
Judy Garland was one of the two sisters called the Gum Sisters. Mm-hmm. That's her real name. The mother had a drug problem, and I guess it was genetic. I don't know what happened to the sister, who never changed her name. She was still Gum. I think she was all right. But the mother would go to Chinatown with my friend's mother, and they would go down and smoke opium. Now, I have a feeling, my father was a doctor, he said there are people that genetically get trapped into either alcohol or drugs or gambling, and it's something genetically that is there. They can't help it. My friend Busby Berkeley did Annie Get Your Gun with her.
Until she was replaced with Betty Hutton.
Well, they took the thing. They had to stop the show. She did one number. He said it was marvelous. For the rest of the time, they had to break the door down to get her out, and she was like this. And they shut the thing down. And when they started again with Betty Hutton, he reported the studio, and they said, "No, you cost us a lot of money on that other thing." And he said, "What? You gave me this dope addict, this nut." And then you blame me? That's Hollywood for you.
Yes. What have you done for me lately?
Yes.
Did you know Betty Hutton?
Oh, yes.
I get the feeling she's up there telling God what to do now.
She was her own worst enemy. Very talented, but could not work for anybody. She destroyed herself. She wound up back east somewhere doing something. But she was a strange lady. Socially, she was fine. But when she was starting to work, she tried to take over directing, producing, everything. And they just said, hey, forget it. Yeah.
Well, you look at Frances Farmer, that poor, sad woman who ended up doing television anchoring TV movies in Indianapolis in the later part of their career. Yeah. I think we could probably spend 3 hours talking about some of the people who had magnificent careers, who then went out of vogue and either hit the bottle or the skids. Yeah. And then you see them. You know, we were talking about D.W. Griffith. I had heard that Dory Sherry, when he took over MGM, found D.W. Griffith working on the lot sweeping floors. Well, and said to him, hey, look, you started all this. I'm going to pay you to not sweep floors.
Well, he was a brilliant man, and it's one of those things that, you know, Hollywood it eats people. It destroys people. It is the strangest business. The minute you get into it, they set out to tear you to pieces. Adams Boulevard, when I was a kid, down by Washington and West Adams, was the Beverly Hills of Los Angeles. You'd go down there today, the beautiful big homes down there.
Same way with the Los Feliz area, both of which predated Beverly Hills.
Oh, yeah, this is going
DeMille lived over in Los Feliz.
Yeah, well, he lived up on the top of the hill. DeMille Drive is up there. He gave parties up there at the house. Very nice. But anyway, my grandmother, my mother's grandmother, the people that had the Brunton Studios, had a big home there. And next door neighbor was a nice lady whose son had something to do with the movies. Now, I'm about 6 years old, I guess, 7, and to go visit Grandma. So we'll go next door to the nice lady next door. We have tea and cookies or something. And there was, in the back of the property, you can go there today. It now belongs to the city. I think they donated to the city. You can rent it for parties and stuff. It had these pools, stair step down the mountain, down the back, down to where the 8-car garage was. And in the top one, they had goldfish. Some of the fish got down into the other. And I wanted to feed the fish. I think I killed them. I overfed them. Their ladies are all having a wonderful time talking. I'm out killing the fish, and the son comes over, Busby Berkeley, and meets my mother and my grandmother and everything. And then, of course, I come in, handsome young man, being polite. My mother's, he's an actor, you know. He was at Hal Road Studios. Oh, he is. Why don't you send him over to Warner Brothers? Maybe I can use him. And I'm doing a picture called 42nd Street. Maybe I can use him. From that day to the day he died, we were buddies. I followed him around. He originally, very wealthy family, 42nd Street, Jumbo, you name it. He was the man who invented the musical. He had been trained classically as an engineer and a mechanical engineer. And you'll notice all that his dance numbers were geometric. And he cut the hole in the top of the studio so he could do the down shot so the girls would go out like blossoming flowers and so forth. He built, I talked to one of the engineers, said they found where he made a machine, all mechanically driven, that would take a camera and repeat the shot over again automatically. All you had to do was that. Today they do it with a computer, where it will repeat every time the same shot. Thing about that is that you can do what we call front and back light. You do a front light with the dancers, then you turn off the front light and highlight the back light, and they become phantoms. They're like black cutouts. And where the backlight stuff is, you have a hole back on the negative. Now you can put anything you want back there.
And if you do it well enough, you don't see what we call the matte line.
Yeah, the fringing, yeah.
Yeah.
Busby was trained as an engineer, so his stuff was all mathematical. He built a machine that would run the camera the same identical shot each time. Dolly with it, with the electric motor, stop, turn the camera around, point this way, turn the camera around, point that way.
That was so far ahead of its time, because what they came up with, the traveling mat, which is what they called it eventually, was very difficult. Most of those composite shots had to be stationary.
Yeah, and he built it. Well, the man that works with me down there, the engineer, cameraman, i.e., he found this thing, I think it was at MGM. And they said, what the hell is it? They start fooling with it, and they realized that today we do it with computers. Mm-hmm. But this was mechanical, and it worked. That was a smart man. And he said, who built it? And they said, the guy that did the dance numbers here, his name is Berkeley. He said, Busby Berkeley.
Isn't it amazing how talented people are so multifaceted? And quite often we only know of one thing they did.
Yeah. We had a dinner. Buzz won an award. And one of the people who spoke was Jack Warner. Now, he worked for Warner's and he worked for MGM. You know, he finished over here MGM's Need You for this new musical. Anyway, Jack Warner I took the paper. Now, Jack Warner was a short man, very dapper. And he had the speech, and then he looked at it. He said, I'm sure the young man who wrote this speech for me were well-intentioned. He threw it away. He said, let me tell you about this SOB. He cut a hole in the top of my studio that leaked. And instead of using the same stage again, he turned around and cut a hole in another stage, which leaked. And it went on like this. It was a love fest between the two of them. It was beautiful.
Lucky, I must ask you about two people, one of whom was Buster Keaton.
Dear Buster Keaton.
Spend a couple of minutes talking about him, because I see him as a man who was so athletic. You see this guy standing on a street, a speeding streetcar. He reaches out, grabs it, and without pulling his arm off, he goes there. He wrote his own stuff, quite often off the cuff as he filmed, and then goes to MGM, where they say, now, wait a minute, Buster, you can't ad-lib these. We have to have a script. We have to know how much this is going to cost. And the man was shackled by the rigmarole of Hollywood. Give us your take on Buster Keaton.
Way back, I, as a little kid, was made up with pigtails and a little hat on and a silent picture, and with a Chinese woman. I wasn't Chinese, they just made me up as a kid. She's dragging me across the street in the middle of a tong war, and a cameraman, newsreel cameraman, is out there shooting the tong war with bullets flying around, but he's out there getting the picture.
And that was the cameraman, I think, was the name of the movie.
And there was a monkey that pulled all the film out as fast as he shot it, so he had nothing at the end. I ran into him later through a friend who had the theater on La Cienega where he ran Nothing But Silence. And Buster would come down and talk about making the pictures and so forth, and we'd run the General or whatever. So we'd all go out and have a coffee and pie across the street or something, you know. And so we became friends. Buster was a really talented guy because he had built these miniature cars for the elevated. They were probably 4 feet long with the figures in them and everything, and he wanted to do a thing based on these called Murder on the Elevated, in which the guy holds everybody hostage and the murder happens and so forth. And we had these things going by all the time. Then you cut to the interior set piece, you know. Never got to make it, but I was going to work with him on it. And, of course, you know, he knew that I'd worked in silence, and Laurel and Hardy were friends of ours. And so we were, you know, buddies. And I'd go have lunch with him and so forth. Now, Paramount came up with, we're going to do the Buster Keaton story. Well, now how are we going to get? And they came up with Donald O'Connor, my other buddy from way back when. I used to drive Donald O'Connor. He was so young he couldn't drive a car to the Rainbow Rehearsal Hall with these box of tap shoes under his arm. And I said, the family lived on a little street by Columbia Pictures there, with the little side streets. The Egyptian court. Everybody had, in those days, everything had a motif. Yeah, and it had the big figures of, I don't know, a couple of Egyptian gods, and so that's where they lived with his family. But anyway, and he told me, he said, I could, because he was a vaudeville kid. You know, his family were in vaudeville, and he, at 4 years old, he was tap dancing with his family, you know, on stage. Dear Donald, God, there's a multi-talented, unbelievable dance, sing, do whatever you want.
Oh, you only need to look at that one scene in Singing in the Rain, where he does that acrobatic dancing.
Well, the thing where he make him laugh, where he tilts the back of the couch over, you know, and goes right on and just balances it.
Right, and dances up the wall.
And then that he learned to do from Buster Keaton.
Wow. Well, you know, that is a Keaton kind of routine.
He said, Keaton told me, now I'm going to have you run up the wall, you turn around and run back down the wall, and the two heavies bang into the wall. I can't do that. He said, certainly you can do that. Come on. He said, and he taught me to do it.
And how old would Keaton have been when he did that?
Close to 80.
Yeah.
He said, I couldn't believe this guy. I'll tell you how strong he was. He had a little wife. She weighed 98, 100 pounds. To make a living, he was on the road doing a play called The Gorilla, where he wore this suit, gorilla suit, which weighed close to 50 pounds. His wife was put in a seat on the aisle. He come through the exit door on one side, grabbed her, ran across the back of the seats like a tightrope.
You mean the top of the back of the seats?
Holding her, and run out the other exit door on the other side. With everybody screaming, yelling, wow, boom, boom. And I said, weren't you worried? Oh, Buster wouldn't drop me.
Oh.
I said, right. Oh.
Lucky, quickly, I don't know what your feelings were about the late Larry Harmon. He's one of those people you either loved or hated. He was Bozo the Clown.
And it was love-hate.
Yeah, but he befriended Stan Laurel and got Stan to sell him the rights to Laurel and Hardy instead of Disney. Is it not true that in his later years, Stan lived alone, had his number in the phone book, and just loved to have any kind of company?
Somebody wrote that he was destitute in a little rooming house. He lived he owned the apartment house down in Santa Monica and the one next to it. And I went up there, and he had, at that time, what was considered a big TV set, probably 36 inches. And on the top of it was sitting his Oscar. He had a pin spot, if you know what that is, on this room.
For the music box.
Right on the Oscar, sitting on the top of on the top of my TV.
Well, I'm glad to hear he wasn't lonely.
And he said to me, "Have you seen my Mr. Clean?" And every time I see that thing, I think the Oscars.
That's right.
And I'd go there. He was very ill. He couldn't go down the stairs, so I would get something and bring it up, and we'd talk about the fun days. See, I was raised with all of these people because in those days it was a village. My father was the doctor. Everybody knew him. You know, Laurel and Hardy used to come to the house for parties. I mean, wild parties. My father's making ice cream. My mother's, this is before radio, playing the piano. People got around and sang. Babe was out. He had a ukulele. And we had high steps. It was like the big porch, like an East.
Well, he fashioned himself as singer.
Yeah. He was a good singer. Mm-hmm. And he's out there playing this ukulele, and I'm sitting next to him, and I'm watching him. He says, "Would you like to learn to play this?" So he gave it to me, and he taught me. Bing, 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 bing. Oh, Katerina, hi, Katerina, bing, 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 bing. Well, I was in seventh heaven, and he was just a big bear along that line on his latter years. He was very ill. I was working, or had worked in and out of KTLA, when it was the Paramount station over on Melrose. And somebody said to me, "Geez, we've been running the Laurel and Hardys, and we're getting all this fan mail." They had these big canvas bags from the post office. Those are like 5 bags loaded with mail. What are we going to do with it? And I said, "Give it to me. Put it in the back of my station wagon." I get one of the guys. We load this stuff up. I went over to the hospital to see Babe. He was propped up. He's watching himself on the little TV set in the room. I nearly cried. He'd lost a lot of weight. He was dying, And I came in, and the nurses would all come in, and the doctors they all knew. And we took a gurney, and I loaded all this stuff. We pushed it into the room, opened the bags, and I started pouring mail on his bed. I said, "You've got to answer your damn fan mail." He looked at all these letters. "For me? You mean they haven't forgotten us?" I'll tell you, there wasn't a dry eye in the room.
Oh, I bet. I'm about to tear up right now.
He thought, that he was...
Sure.
Now, Laurel told me a funny story. He said, their theme, the Cuckoo Waltz, he wanted to go back to England with Babe, and he's going to show him the town where he was born in England. Now, they did not consider themselves stars, just actors. They didn't realize who they were, really. They were just 2 actors, comics. And off of the train, and the town Pa band is playing the Cuckoo Waltz.
Wow.
What? And everybody's cheering me. They're looking at one another. Why is this? They didn't realize who they were. They had no ego. He says, but what blew my mind, the town clock, they had reset it, and it chimed the Cuckoo Waltz. He said, that was it. That was it. He said, I fell apart right then and there. I said, you didn't realize that you were a big star? Not really. I mean, we were working actors. We were working comics, you know.
Lucky Brown started in the silent era, made some appearances in the old Our Gang comedies. He knew DeMille and D.W. Griffith and Buster Keaton and Mickey Rooney. Well, there's probably no one in Hollywood that Lucky Brown didn't get to know over the years. You have probably worn more hats in Hollywood than just about anybody else here. I'm going to give you an impossible assignment. And I want you to tell me if you could go back and be again with 5 people here in Hollywood, who would they be and why?
Boy, that is rough, because the people I've worked with, I loved all of them. You know, for Duke Wayne, Randy Scott. Randy Scott was a Southern gentleman and very wealthy. He financed his own pictures. I don't know. Stan Babe, of course. George Stevens was our cameraman.
Wow, and went on to do Greatest Story Ever Told, among other things.
Well, I worked for him on Shane. I played Charlie Riker. Yes. Roll the tape back a little bit. They wanted Jack Palance. Jack Palance was at 20th Century Fox and tied up. So, big panic, because they had to go up to Wyoming, and everything was set except the damn gunfighter. I get a call from my agent. I was working at Universal, playing gambler, I think. Anyway, so I asked, can I get off? He said, well, at lunchtime. He said, I'm take an hour and a half. You know, we won't need you. We shoot other stuff. I rush over there. I go in. There's like 40 guys, all in, you know, some of them in sports clothes, some of them in Western outfits. I'm in my gambler's outfit. And George Stevens is walking down the line. Hi. No. Your name? And he looks at me up and down. I said, well, I'm on my lunch break. I'm working at Universal on, I forgot what the hell the picture was. Anyway, oh, yeah. And so he goes on. That night, I got a call from the agent and said, go back over there. They want to do a screen test with you. Ooh, that sounds promising. So I go back over, and they tested about, I guess, 4 or 5 people, 2 at a time. You know, it must have been even numbers, maybe 6. Okay. I tested with Tom Tyler, who was an old friend. And I said, well, hell, he's got it. I mean, he's done this part 1,000 times. I mean, everybody has killed him on camera. His mark, or trademark, was he shoots it out with the lead, you know, Errol Flynn, smiles, puts the gun away, turns around, drops dead. And then they always think, oh, my God, he killed Flynn. You know? Well, so that was it. I go back to work, and I get a call from says, go over, they've got a contract for you. For what? You're the gunfighter. You're doing the... Oh, wow. So I go over to Ginger, who handled all the contract. Hi, Lucky. I understand you're working with George Stevens. I said, I guess I am. And I signed the contract. They said, fine. And then I was living with my folks between marriages, back with them. And my father says, you got a call. Saturday you're going out to ride. You're supposed to report to the main gate. I said, my friends are having fun with me. They're, the Cowboys are kidding me. My father, when he retired, bought a horse, being a Kentuckian, a horse ranch. And I spent 7 years cowboying. I've fallen off enough horses. Anyway, so I ignored it. Saturday is there. I'm in old boots and Levi's and a faded shirt washing my car. My father said, I just had a call from Paramount. They're not happy with you. Where are you? You're late. And I go, oh, my God, this was for real. So I Jump in the car.
Got in your wet car.
Yeah, and drive over there with the clean car. Drive over there. The limo's there. They're looking at me in the boots and the Levi's. I said, well, I heard we were going to ride a horse, so I went over to the wardrobe and got some clothes. And then POY says, and we get out to the place, and the guy looks at everybody, all in sports clothes and loafers, and he said, well, I'm you. Said, oh, he went to wardrobe and got those clothes. He said, I suggest everybody do that. He said, you're going to ruin your ankles in those low shoes. You get some boots on. And get something because you're going to sweat out here. Get rid of the coats and so on. So here are 5 or 6 actors getting on and off the horse. He says, maybe we get you on and off the horse. And he said, Freddie rides, they'll double you. So I'm sitting up on the top rail watching these tenderfeet, which is it's better than tenderbutt, which is really what it is. Mm-hmm. And
watching these tin horns try to get on and off.
Not tin horns. Those are gamblers.
That's right.
So the guy finally, and he looks at me up, hey, you fella, you're going to have to do this. Don't be afraid of him. Just do it. And, come down here and I'll show you. And everybody's now taking it easy, And I, for some strange reason, I don't know why I just did it. I got off the thing and I walked over to the horse, grabbed the reins. I looked at the horse looked at me, and I said, oh, hell. And I hit him in the ribs with my thumb, and I Pony Expressed him. I shot off there, and I did a Pony Express mount, spun him around at the end, flew back, landed in a Pony Express dismount right in front of him. I said, now what am I supposed to do? He said, you can go to hell. You go home. He said, you're not, and the guy told me afterwards, said, he insulted you. He said, you're no damn actor. You're a cowboy. And the guy says, hey, he insulted. I said, no, that is a compliment. When the Hollywood cowboys call you a cowboy, then that's a compliment. I said, no. Actors, they hold their nose, but cowboy, you're one of them. And so one of the regulars said, hey, Michael, what are you doing? I said, I'm taking horseback riding lessons. So they came over to the Big John and told, this guy's done more westerns than you have. And so he says, well, I said, no, don't take me off. They take me off. I'm on salary. If I'm out here, I ain't getting paid. And I said, fine, I'll be here every day. I'll muck out the stables. I don't care for this kind of money.
Now, if we watch Shane, where are you?
Well, you have to realize the original picture was 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Don't tell me you're on the cutting room floor.
A lot of me is on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, but you still got paid.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that the magic of being on the cutting room floor? Doesn't do anything for your reputation.
Her friend. Well, I wound up on the cutting room floor, and the guy goes, oh, that's too bad. She says, no, with the editor. I'm still in the picture. What happens is, here I am. I'm taking these tenderfeet out and riding them around, teaching them to ride. Okay, we get to Wyoming. I'm up there for 4 or 5 days. The agent calls. Palance is available if you can use him. I get an arm around my shoulder, and the assistant director says, look, it was Gilbert Rollo's brother, by the way, was our first assistant, was Chico Day. He says, Mr. Stevens, the gunfighter's a very small part. He wants to make you one of the brothers. And runs all the way through the picture, which he did. I was the last actor off the set. The last one, because he felt bad. And he asked me if I would do the fights. And I said, sure. Well, on B Westerns, that was part of it. I mean, that wasn't considered a stunt. He paid me an extra $1,000 a day for that week that we were doing the fight in the barroom. Anyhow, here I am. Now, the brother, Jack, is there. I taught Jack to ride a horse, my hand to God. I taught him to ride. I taught him how to draw a gun. He'd been a boxer. He was very fast. Anyhow, we walk out. George Stevens is sitting up on the crane, and he said, Mr. Brown, would you move over your back of, we can't see you. But, I said, okay, Uncle George.
Ooh.
Dead silence. That boom came right down, and it's like, what did you say, sir? Well, when you were shooting the Art Gangs, we all called you Uncle George. I said, you were directing then. I said, Ewing, you're covering the girl. Would you move more to your right and move the girl over a little bit? That's fine. Okay, Uncle George. He said, you worked in our gangs? I said, yeah, I was Algernon, the rich kid. My pal after that, we talked about everybody on the lot. And my hand to God, none of the actors were invited in for the dailies. I got to see the dailies every day.
He was your old buddy.
Yeah. It was like Uncle George. And people thought it was my uncle, and they would say, that also, God, look who's behind you there.
Don't talk with Lucky around.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask how old you are, but in what year did you do your first movie?
What, my age or the year?
The year.
The year. Let's see. I was born in 21.
Okay.
That would have been 3 months. That was at Christmas time. That'd be January, February. About February of March of 1922, my mother had one picture to do with her friend called Ruth Rowland, and my aunt brought me down on the set. And everybody oohed and nod. Oh, what a cute baby. What a cute little girl. Hello. The director said, good, we need a baby. Put her in the bassinet. And my mother said, it's a boy. He said, who's going to look?
Right.
By the way, I have to tell you, or my wife will tell this story, how I came into the world. I told you that we had a game room. We had 3 card tables and a pool table. My father, at that time, hospitals, he didn't want my mother in the hospital because too many diseases around. So he set that up. The pool table became the delivery table. But he would go to handle that. He called his dear friend, another doctor, and said, hey, I'd like you to deliver the baby, He says, well, my brother and I have gone into another business. He's kind of retired from doctoring. He said, but my nephew just graduated. We'll have him doing. We'll have cigars and brandy, and whatever comes out, we'll, cheer him on. Okay. Young man was there. A few minutes later, the nurse runs up and said, it's a breech birth, and he's out of his league on this thing. He just doesn't know what to do. So he says, okay, get me a gown and a mask. I'll go down. And he goes down and delivers me. So he had to sign my birth certificate. So I was born on a pool table. They were undertakers. So I came into this earth delivered by an undertaker on a pool table.
That's got to be the title of your book.
And I told this story. My wife didn't believe it until she saw my birth certificate. And later, he was head of the school board and handed me my diploma at Belmont High School when I graduated from high school. And his line was, Ma, you've grown since I saw you last.
You went to Jack Webb's high school then.
That's right, and
right.
A couple of others.
As I've said before, few people in Hollywood have done what you have done over the years. You have to write that book.
Oh, yeah?
You got photos to put in it?
I just finished a book, and I liked it so much I'm going to read another one. By the way, you ever heard of Pierce Brothers Mortuaries?
Yes.
Oh, that's the doctor who delivered, Dr. William Pierce.
Now, are you, when your days are over, are you going to be put into the ground by a doctor?
I thought about that. OBGYN.
Turn the tables. Lucky, thanks for letting me come into your home, and it's been a pleasure.
Anytime. You're welcome. Mi casa, su casa.
Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for going back into the archives with me. I'm Dennis Daly. See you next time, right here on YouTube.